Welcome to the Crypto Swamp Creatures, the show you never knew you needed and still don't want anyways. I'm Christopher Alexander, your blockchain and advocacy communications expert.
And I'm Justin Wallin, your guide through the often murky world of politics and polling.
Every week, we dive into the intersection of crypto, policy, and politics without taking sides. We're here to give you the straight, data-driven analysis that influences the decisions of those who want to win or want to be elected.
Think of it as a late 80s newscast, but with a twist. We bring you the serious stuff, but with a dash of sardonic wit and just a hint of irreverence.
So whether you're a crypto enthusiast, a policy wonk, or just someone who appreciates a data-driven approach, this is your place.
We bring you both sides, weigh the impact on crypto, and then we share what we use for show prep every week on our Medium.
So remember, no one is as smart as someone who agrees with you. And now get ready to enter the no swamp zone. All right, welcome to the Crypto Swamp Creatures show. I would say what episode it is, but I actually don't know, which I guess is a good thing because we've done so many. Justin, quite a bit going on. Do we have any swampy attestations? Oh, yes, pocket squares. Gauche, too much? Too much on camera, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I've never been a fan of pocket squares, although many well-dressed gentlemen disagree. So I think it's just your own personal style. It's too much if you're on camera like this. Right? It's just too much going on.
Never do it for appearances.
Yeah. And let's not forget, I mean, they're a utilitarian thing. They're there to wipe your nose. And I think that's one thing that's always better left uncalled attention to. This is me. I'm going to take this, wipe my nose, and stick it back into my clothing. That just doesn't speak well to me. But I get it. It's a flash of color. It's a flash of something. And some folks like it, and some folks look great on it. For me, no.
Yeah, it's a bit, I don't know, mafioso grandpa something.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. But I have an undeserved prejudice against the cravat as well. I dislike the cravat. Won't see me wearing the cravat, and yet, yeah. It's
I've worn a pocket square. I will never wear a cravat. We had these two guys at one place I worked at, and they had like cravat Fridays, and they came in and they were wearing those things, and it looked so stupid. It was unbelievable.
If you catch a glimpse of yourself, you just want to kick your own ass. There's no way to get around. You annoy yourself, deservedly so. It's too precious, right? It's just too precious.
Yeah. They're immensely successful, though. So, I mean, maybe I missed something.
More power to them. I mean, it's a purely subjective thing. I think they should have an entire closet filled wall to wall with the very best in cravats.
I don't know. It might objectively be bad, but we'll worry about it another time. Speaking of subjective, objective, quantitative, qualitative, I sent you some data. It was out of a press release, and I want to say you hated it. That's not quite accurate. You had some concerns about where it was all coming from, and I think it's important that people get a little better sense of how to qualify or triage or properly consider like polling data when they get it. So why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there's precious little polling data about crypto. It's the most basic numbers that you would want to have answered. For example, the two most basic: how many people own it, and how many people use it. And what I mean by use it, they conduct transactions of some kind aside from trading it, right? They're interacting in some way, purchasing some stuff. Now, I may not be using the most accepted perspective of it, but broadly speaking, that's what folks are thinking about. Do you own it and trade it, but do you actually use it? Those two things. And we've got a number of different, I think fundamentally there are different definitions on those two things, and that's part of the challenge when you're conducting research. And then you have widely varying data points in terms of what those numbers are. What you sent me, and I'm not sure if it's what you sent me. There was the one from cryptoliteracy.org.
That's the one.
Okay, and then there was another one from security.org that was released earlier this year, and then there's one actually from the Federal Reserve. And the challenge is they're all completely different data points. I mean, if you just take the point of, do you own crypto? One of them says 70% of Americans own crypto. The other one says 40%. They've been tracking it. It's up 10% from 30% last year. And then the Fed says 7% own crypto. And you would think that it's much easier to figure this out, but it isn't. I mean, ultimately, not all these things are reported in any database, right? You have to ask people, and they respond. So what that means is we have fundamentally widely varying methodologies in collecting that information, and I think there are fundamentally different definitions of what those things are, and so people are responding with what their definition is or what they're hearing, and it may not accurately respond what the researcher's trying to get. What this means is it's a burgeoning topic. There is not a lot of agreement. And the industry would do well as an industry to consider engaging in regularized, iterative research over time that is kind of standard bearing. There's going to be a bunch of other stuff, as there should be, with other interests that are aligned with it in some way, shape, or form with the crypto industry. But the industry as a whole would do well to establish this centralized sort of, and I know I hate this centralized thing, but you got to have centralized. You're going to have some agreed upon terms and some agreed upon data that really reflect the ebb and flow of the fabric of crypto ownership and utilization. It doesn't really exist now. So, I mean, when we're digging into the results of those surveys, they're all interesting, by the way. You can actually draw conclusions from them. You just can't really look at the numbers that they're saying. You can't say, well, 45% actually means 45%, because we really don't know. And that's in no fault of the person who's conducting the research. I think they're doing the best they can. And if you look at any of these things, there's no indication to suggest that there's nefarious or bad methodology. Just in half of them, we don't really know what the methodology is. So anyway, the point is that's a lot of blah, blah in a very wonky part of the world, but we're missing key data points, and it would behoove the industry to introduce those over time. Otherwise, when they go to anyone who's a stakeholder or a policymaker and say, this is what people think, there's absolutely no reason for that person to believe them, because they can immediately, just like I did, pick out 3 different data sources that say wildly different things.
I wonder, because you think, and now we're purely speculating, but you kind of have a 20% number of people who've had crypto, and then we'll get to definitions, and then 7% currently. I can't remember where now, right? But I had read that there were there's a number of people who bought cryptocurrencies during COVID and then cashed out. And so I wonder if you have 7% are like active users, perhaps they have a wallet and they've done something in the past month, and maybe do you have a percentage, and again, purely speculating here, but that are like just holding crypto so they don't appear active and they're inactive. And then, this number that the Coinbase folks, or I think Stand With Crypto, uses, kind of one in 5 people are, they say, cryptocurrency owners. I suspect you're saying have ever had it, ever. I don't know where on earth the 70% came from at all. I don't know how you got to that number, unless it was like heard of crypto. I don't know how that, I can't.
That's the challenge, and we honestly, we can peel the onion, because there is actually information in there, but we don't have answers from the report, right? I think there was a little bit of they made some errors in reporting that lead to more questions than they answer.
Absolutely. And so on the subject of polling, we have an election going on. Kamala Harris uttered the word digital asset yesterday. She didn't say crypto. And so Harris supporters are saying now that I think, well, in addition to drilling for oil and being a super pro-gun president now, she's going to do we're going to have government Bitcoin mining. I think they're beside themselves with joy. So we're going to talk about how she's doing the polls. Trump, of course, star of they're eating the pets TikToks. Announced his own coin, bought people burgers with Bitcoin or beers or whatever, and has been running around. So what's life like for these folks over in polling land?
Well, when we look at this, and we always look at averages, right? Because the latest polls are snapshots in time, and they use different methodologies, and they may be accurate pretty regularly, or they may not. But we need to kind of look at the whole ebb and flow. What's interesting here is this average shows Harris at 2.3% difference, which is a numerical difference, but not a statistical difference. So normally I'd be looking at this and saying it's still an absolute dead tie nationally. However, I don't think that is where gravity is going. I do think based on these last numbers here and the consistency of them, you see much, much more numbers that show Harris having a lead versus Trump. Combine that with a number of those numbers are outside of the margin of error, starting with this one here. DPP, don't know who that is, doesn't really matter. But we have Morning Consult, CBS, and NBC, all known entities, and all of those are outside of the margin of error in 3 of the most recent things. So I think right now, I don't know how large it is, but I think right now Kamala Harris likely has a slight lead that is statistically significant on the national level. Does that mean if the election was held today, she would win? No. I don't think so. I think it means that she would win the popular vote, but she would lose the electoral college. And I know that makes certain group of people, their hair explode on fire. But we won't get into that particular discussion. And hopefully, when I press this, the world doesn't look like it's in an earthquake again. But when we look at other items, if we're going to give that kind of a benefit of the doubt based on.
By the way, I do want to point out, everyone knows this whole electoral college thing. And they've had about 200 years to devise strategies to figure out how to win around it. Actually, about 220-ish. So, you don't get to throw the Constitution out because you didn't win. Like, you have to have a strategy that wins in a federalist system. So it's only 2 centuries worth of figuring it out.
Yeah, and let's face it. When you lose something in politics, especially, why it isn't in politics, especially, I don't know. But when you lose something, you always cry foul of the rules. Republicans should know when they walk into a debate that they are not on friendly ground with the media. This is nothing new. This is table stakes, and they should be prepared for it. And they should deal with it professionally. You don't cry about it afterwards. Come on, this is the reality of the world you live in. Supreme Court does something you don't like. Does that mean you change the nature of the Supreme Court? No, it means you elect presidents that will, appoint Supreme Court justices that you may more align with. These things work, and they work over time. And really, what they do is make intractability, right? Anyway, the point is, I do particularly dislike the complaining about the system when the reality is people only complain when they lose, right? And that's on every side, both sides.
And the Supreme Court justices aren't popcorn. You don't just get one out of the microwave. So, the system moves slowly. So you don't like Supreme Court now, and you're waiting for somebody to die. Again, you got like 2 centuries of this. Okay, this isn't a shocker unless you just had the worst civics education ever. All right, 200 years it's worked this way. It's not changing. Now watch it turn out that the Supreme Court nomination process was changed in 1840, and I'm going to get hate mail.
And then I would only urge, if you disagree with what people write on either side, read what they write. Don't just listen to the agreement and say it's horrible. Read what they write. If you don't like what someone who leans left has decided, read what they wrote. If you don't like what someone leans right, in at least perceptually, read what they wrote, and you'll find that these are reasoned people doing reasoned things. You may not agree with them, but you'll understand their logic.
Yeah, it's not a cartoon black and white world.
Yeah, exactly. Look at what's going on in Arizona. Now, look, some of these things are old, right? You can really only take the top 3. But the New York Times Siena poll, the top one there, is by no means an artifice of the right. And it shows Trump up 5 points, right? Well outside the margin of error. You see all of these items in red that seems to show gravity. And then all these other states really are too close to call, and there's variance within them. But look at what happens over in Georgia. Same kind of thing here. And again, yes, you've got New York Times right here showing Trump up a little bit more than the always heralded Rasmussen being, if you're looking at a Republican pollster, Rasmussen usually gets the mantle of saying, well, they lean right. New York Times is showing Trump in the same time zone as Rasmussen. The point is here, just like I think nationally, gravity is flowing towards Harris, I also think that in terms of the Electoral College, right now, gravity is flowing towards Trump. So it's starting to get interesting, thankfully.
Yeah, I read something I thought was interesting. This isn't my analysis, but it made sense. So smart, someone agrees with you. But it looked like if Trump, whoever it was speculating, if Trump wins Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania, which are all in the Eastern time zone, polls closed. I mean, voting's starting, I think, in some of the states already. There's very little to no way that Kamala Harris has a path to victory based on the state of play today. And I don't know if that'll hold. I thought that was interesting. Curious what your thoughts are.
Well, so, all of that stuff really gets interesting because it really is engaging conversation, right? It's just dealing with probabilities and weights and this sort of thing. But I think you could actually narrow that even more, and that you can say, I think reasonably so, that to win the election, Trump must win Pennsylvania. And similarly, Harris must win Georgia. It's basically taking just 2 states and calling an entire 50-state election on it. So I get it. It's take this with a grain of salt. But I do actually think that is the core leading indicator. And if you want to expand that bit, I think you're absolutely right. If he wins those 3 states, he's got it. It's remarkable how meanit swing states are. These battleground states are. People talk about them. There's a reason they talk about them. They truly, truly matter. This is where it gets made.
Maybe we'll do an election night live stream. First of all, unless you got to do hits, I won't be doing hits on election night.
No, I usually do election night. So yeah, count me in.
I mean, because we can't do worse than the networks, right? Like we can't. And ideally it'll be over by 10. So we'll just go to bed like 10:30. It'd be perfect. So. Yeah,
I mean, the only way that things are really going to be topsy-turvy, right, is if those 2 states are inverted. And we're going to see this is going to take a long time, and it's really going to get messy, and everyone should hold their breath and calm down.
Yeah, well, everyone should hold their breath and calm down anyways, because we can't keep trying to kill candidates prognosticate doom all the way up to and including the rapture. All as part of it, right? So I want to be bipartisan in my commentary.
Your criticism.
I was served an ad, and listen, more power to you. If you're not bothering anybody, do whatever you want. But I was served. I'm going to say this with a straight face because you're going to believe me, but you're not. I was served an ad for a T-shirt. Now, by the way, I don't know how they work this targeting out because I have an DYOR shirt that's with 3 R's. It's a French band, and it's a skull made up of chickens. I have, I have a blood incantation long sleeve. All right, so you can guess what makes this target even more bizarre. But I got an ad served, and it said, "Jesus is my savior, and Trump is my president." But Jesus, swathed in light, was leaning forward and was resting his hands on Trump's shoulders.
Aww.
And I think if I made a donation, then I got the T-shirt for free.
It's true that the texting, the political texting, really is a brilliant example of how a certain group of political strategists feel the American public is in terms of their intelligence. And they might be right. I don't think so. I happen to think the American public is broadly more intelligent than that. But it's all, I get the same things. I look at really? Who's clicking on that link and saying, yeah, I'm gonna do it. The best ones are, although actually I think that's the best one I've heard of. But the running a close second are the ones that say, and it's from whomever it might be, close friend of name presidential candidate here, a family member of name presidential candidate here. I've got some confidential information to share with you, and just click this link. Who honestly believes that? And one, doesn't understand the term confidential, and 2, doesn't think you're immediately going to Nigeria. I mean, it just...
And it must work or they wouldn't keep doing it. That's what scares me.
And that makes my rose-tinted glasses turn dark and I get depressed.
Yeah. yeah, I mean, I've killed a number of zealots in my life, state sanctioned, obviously professionally, but so yeah, like nobody thinks they're the bad guys. Okay, I'm telling you, those ISIS dudes got up every day and they're like, I'm making the world a better place. That's why I never trust anyone who says they're making the world a better place. Because what won't you do if you're saving the planet?
Yeah, I mean, most conversation tends to stop at that point, right? People just end up getting louder and louder and louder, and we know where that ends.
What's that Churchill quote? Zealot can't change his mind and won't change the subject.
Poor conversationalist, which is really the worst insult in Churchill's mind.
Yeah, and my all-time favorite Churchill quote, and I'll tell you, I discovered it's true, is he said something akin to, nothing in the world is so exhilarating as having been shot at and missed.
That is him, yeah.
Let me tell you, you hear that thing go by and you're like, yes, this is awesome. I mean,
I can only imagine. It's not a shared experience, but I can only imagine.
Yeah, it's like Christmas and winning the lottery, and it's like you name it, all rolled into one.
So to wrap this up, the notice on this stuff, when we're talking about all these data points, there are differences, but there are fractions, right? And the challenge that we started this conversation off was there are differences of miles, right? 70%, 40%, 20%, 7%. These mean you can't have a conversation because you don't have a shared understanding of what the facts are. When you have to be close enough, right, with these polls, and they are, no matter what you may think of one or the other or whatnot, they're all within the same time zone. Once you have that, then you can have a reasonable conversation, even with people who fundamentally disagree with you. And that's a real challenge facing crypto right now, is they need to get their data sorted.
Absolutely. Well, like, subscribe, go to the Medium, interact with us, you name it. We're here to be abused.
And that's all for this week on the Crypto Swamp Creatures.
We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the intersection of crypto, politics, and policy.
Remember, the data doesn't lie, and neither do we. Well, not about anything important anyways.
Until next time, stay informed, stay skeptical, stay out of the swamp.